This is a ridiculous story that will challenge everything you know about an MBA. It involves a 25-year-old Columbia MBA student named Jack Rains who got in trouble for posting a ridiculously over-the-top LinkedIn post about, wait for it, making $100,000 as a side hustle by getting 63 COVID jabs a day for 16 straight days. This post got him sent to the principal's office, the dean's office of Columbia's storied business school, where he explained his transgressions with a simple word: satire. Now I'm so excited for you to meet Jack Rains. He is a legend, and not just for his insane LinkedIn shitposting skills. It's the way he combines the traditional career path of finance and going to an elite university with memes, viral posts, and made-up online personas. To me, he's really captured the best of both worlds, and there's so much we can learn from him on building up our careers, improving our online brands, and of course, getting good at LinkedIn. But first, if you're an ambitious professional working in finance or in tech, looking to step off the conventional path and try something different, something that allows you to have time freedom and live life on your own terms, we have a group coaching cohort with like-minded professionals. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now, here is my interview with Jack Rains. I was thinking about how to introduce you. And I'm going to mix it up, and I'm going to give my interpretation of your career.
Okay.
And then have you correct me. But
Perfect.
I'm like, he's part Nelk Boys, part Nancy Pelosi. Like, you're like this duality that I can't wrap my arms around.
That's an insane, two ends of the spectrum again. I've never gotten a comparison to either of them.
And to be honest, my audience probably doesn't even know who the Nelk Boys are. So,
yeah.
But I say that because you're this duality in one way. Is like, to me, you are like the not carefree, you're the untethered, dynamic internet virtuoso, like social media, writing, blogging, memes, like all that stuff. But then on the other hand, like, you went to Columbia Business School. And so you are a part of a track, and we'll talk about which track, if any, but you have establishment credentials as well. So that's the Nancy Pelosi side.
Yeah.
And the Nelk Boys side is, your shit posting side on LinkedIn. And so I'm just like, I'm so fascinated. So the way I read your career, you went to undergrad, you worked as a financial analyst, COVID happened, you're like, fuck this, I've saved some money, I'm going to travel the world. You learned how to write, or you became a prolific internet writer. That opened up some doors for you writing. You went to Columbia Business School in New York, and you are joining as an editor for Sherwood, which I guess is RobinHood's. Correct?
We can get into that. But yeah, okay. Sherwood is basically a media venture launched by RobinHood. So RobinHood already had two bigger newsletters. We're building a broader media company on top of that. So I actually started last week.
Oh, awesome. So you have a full-time day job from a publicly traded tech company. So again, that's your Nancy Pelosi. You're like, what the fuck did he say? But yeah, I'm just fascinated by that. But I left some holes in that. Is that a fair representation of your career to date?
No, that's if you're looking at a bigger chronological what I was doing from age 21 through now, I'm 26 now. That's pretty spot on. The bridges that jump from stage to stage to stage is where it's weird. If you were just looking at what I'm doing basically every year, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, they look completely dislocated, not connected at all. But yeah, that's a good summation of what I've been up to.
Awesome. I love that. So we'll jump into our question. Today's question is, do you need an MBA? Spoken with the wisdom of Jack Rains. So, all right, Jack, I want you to take us back to, what was the moment when you realized that the internet was going to have a massive impact on your career?
Probably the first time I was there's two. And one of them I didn't know was going to be a career thing, but there's when did I realize holy shit, you can really reach a lot of people on the internet and just really experience the exponential side of it. And then one where it was oh wow, this could be a career thing for me. The first is the first one, I don't really think I've talked about much before, but like I've talked about how, so during COVID, like you were talking about how I was working as a financial analyst, and then I said, screw this, I want to travel before business school. The thing that made that a possibility, not just a pipe dream, was I made a lot of money trading SPACs during the pandemic.
Okay.
But within that, I was on Reddit and Twitter a lot, and me and a few other guys started a subreddit, like a forum or channel within Reddit, just about SPACs, just to discuss, like, basically post news, like merger news, different rumors, this and that.
Mhm.
And then we made a Discord server. Like the subreddit blew up. It's now has like 200,000 people in it. It's pretty big. But we had like a Discord server, and like for anybody who doesn't know, Discord is essentially like a chat app like WhatsApp, but it's a lot nerdier. Basically, tech/finance. Everybody in crypto is on Discord. I didn't know what any of this was, and somebody made a Discord server for SPACs. And then they made these plugins that would send us push notifications when there was like a new SPAC filing or a company was going public through a SPAC merger. And we were actually like trading on this information before it hit the broader market. It was like, it wasn't even like, there was nothing insider about it. It was just, we were getting like the second the SEC filing hit, trading would halt for 15 minutes while the news, like to let the news, I guess, spread. And then trading on halts. Like when there's any merger news, the stock stopped trading for 15 minutes to let people digest it. So we were just like, we would see a SPAC deal, and if it looked like a company that people would FOMO into, like an electric vehicle manufacturer or a sports betting company or this or that, we would just put in like limit orders for, before the halt, it was $10 a share, for like $11 a share, and just hold them for a couple of weeks. And then 3 weeks later, Jim Cramer would be talking about it, and people would be talking about it on Twitter. So we were just really, really early to this stuff, and everybody was just like, we were spreading information faster than it was getting out in the broader media. And it was this one weird niche corner of the internet. So to me, it was like, it opened my eyes to there's all these little pockets of information in probably any possible sector that you could think of. But in finance, people were making money on it, and people are doing this stuff with crypto, SPACs, growth stocks, whatever. But like, the fact that I was like just making money because we were essentially just reading SEC filings faster than everybody else, and then just buying SPACs before other people had a chance to digest them was nuts.
Wow.
So yeah,
Can I pause you there?
Yes.
So you're 22 at this time? 23?
22, 23, yeah.
23. And were you doing financial analyses of stocks, or was it corporate finance or bank?
No, I was
like, well,
it was just like FP&A, like profit planning. I was working for UPS at the time, so it was pretty chaotic because we were having to like rework all of our models off of COVID, supply chain stuff, this and that. But I was working remote during this, and I think it was like a universal, just if you're like a 20-something guy and you were bored, you probably just started trading stocks. It was like the sports betting, but there weren't any sports going on.
Yeah. Oh, this is wild because most of our listeners have kids, and so they remember that moment of COVID as like fucking homeschooling, like competing for like no childcare, like washing door handles, like doorknobs, and single, or I don't know if your relationship status at the time, but an unmarried 22-year-old is like, what am I going to do with all this free time? I'm going to trade stocks on the internet.
So yeah, like companies weren't like, now every company has their remote work like process in place, right? Like I work for RobinHood now. I go in the office 3 or 4 days a week, but I can work remote fully. Like we have our VPNs, all this stuff, have our workflows set up. But at the time, like some people worked remote. Like UPS was just starting to let the managers work remote on Fridays. So it was like, it was a layered implementation of the remote stuff, but I was still doing my onboarding stuff when we went remote from COVID. So like, I really couldn't do anything for 2 weeks because I had to wait on my like VPN plugin thing to come in the mail, and I still hadn't gotten full approval on a bunch of stuff. Like normally for the first 2 weeks, you shadow your supervisors and managers and like just kind of get up to speed on how the company works and do your onboarding stuff. And now I'm having to do like remote Zoom screen share sessions to try to see it. It was just really chaotic. Wow. So I had a lot of time to just do other stuff, which for me and a lot of other people my age was like play Warzone on their Xbox, trade stocks. Like you couldn't really go out and do anything. Everything else was shut down. So if you're locked in your room and you're not doing that much work, you have a computer and an Xbox, and that's like it.
Wow. Were you in New York at the time?
No, I was in Atlanta, which was better than New York during the pandemic. Like I was glad that I wasn't up here for all that.
Yeah. So you're basically it's like it reminds me of high frequency trading, where like it's everything's above board, but you just get the information, like in that case, like 1 microsecond earlier, and you just buy it for 1 second, and you pocket the difference. But you had basically like a simple automation that pulled data from PressWire or SEC.gov or something.
It was literally SEC.gov. Like that was, we would get it, and then it was the stupidest diligence process of all time. You've got 15 minutes, like trading halts for 15 minutes. And we would look at it and you glance, and we did look at the valuation, not from a does this make sense, but like if a SPAC was doing like a $20 billion deal, at this point, like it really wasn't going to pump that much because it was just an insane number. Like there were like the numbers didn't make sense. But if it was like a $2 billion deal, even if I didn't actually think that company was worth $2 billion, you knew a lot of other people would. So just put in a limit order for, like, SPACs were kind of funky in that you could like cash out your shares for $10 cash before the merger goes through, but they could climb theoretically infinitely before the deal. So if you buy close enough to 10, you've kind of hedged your down. Like you lock in, you can't lose more than 10%. So if I thought it was a company that people would get excited about, I would just put in a limit order and see if I got filled when trading unhalted. And like you could get filled, and then when people start talking about it, you just sell. And it's like,
that's amazing.
If you're just, but I feel like there were so many pockets in the market like this. Like people were, like ARK Invest used to publish a list of all the stock trades they made that day. I remember Palantir jumped 20% in a day after hours because ARK had bought it that day. Like there were so many really stupid catalysts for making stocks jump that people were just everybody had their set of cues, and they could be really irrational cues, but it worked for like a year.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So you said that there were two. Were those the two, or was that one of the two events?
That was the first. That was the first time I kind of saw the power of the internet just for spreading information firsthand. The second, which is more relevant now, was writing. So after I was trading SPACs, I started writing freelance articles on Seeking Alpha because I Googled how to make money writing about stocks. Cause like I've always liked writing. Like I wrote some articles for my undergrad business newsletter, stuff like that. Like I was never a journalist. I didn't go to J school. I wasn't working as a journalist. And I saw that Seeking Alpha would pay me to write articles like $100 a pop or whatever. But at this point, this is like summer 2021. I knew I was starting business school the following summer because I'd already gotten in, and I was pretty bored at my job. And thanks to the stock trading stuff, I didn't really need money for that year. Like I had enough saved up that I was very okay with spending a portion of that doing whatever. But so I decided I wanted to travel a lot for that year, but I still wanted to make some money along the way. So I applied for like a staff writing role at Morning Brew and a few other like research/writing jobs in a few different companies. Nobody hired me. And I figured I would just start writing a finance blog and then reapply to some of these jobs. Maybe after I had like a portfolio of work, I just needed to prove that I actually could write more than a few stock pieces on Seeking Alpha. And maybe 3 or 4 months into that, like October of that year, Nick Majuli, who's now a friend of mine, pretty big Twitter following. He has a finance
upcoming
blog.
podcast guest.
Oh, is he? Yeah. Nick's the man, but he's got a blog called Dollars and Data. And like he works for Ritholtz Wealth Management. He's their COO. He's somebody who I viewed as within the like finance internet bubble was like an established figure. And he was tweeting about why people shouldn't actively trade stocks, because his thesis was you can't really evaluate how good you are at it because you can't judge the luck versus skill involved. And there's a huge opportunity cost involved with like the time associated with that. And I just replied to it and was like, yeah, like I have firsthand experience on this. I was trading stocks all during the pandemic, made a lot of money, and then lost like a really big percentage of it in a day instead of a blog post I'd written about it. And he messaged me and he was like, this is an insane story. Do you care if I share it? And I was like, go for it. And I think I had 300 or 400 readers on my blog total then. And that number almost doubled in the next 2 days from him sharing it. And that was the first time that I was like, oh, wow, like people like my stuff. I just haven't built a big enough audience yet to get a lot of eyeballs on it. And it validated that it was like, okay, like I've got some level of like skill and ability to this and people like what I have to say. I just need to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And that was the first day where I started really taking writing like for its own sake seriously.
Yeah. That's an amazing story. Kudos to you, man. Because I'm still like, I'm situating all of our readers, because I followed your story for a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm situating your story for our readers. Like you're like 22 and a half years old at this point, maybe 23.
I would have been newly 24 by the time that happened. But yeah, it was trading stocks at 23, started the blog at 24. Yeah.
Got it. And Nick, so for those of you who don't know Nick, he's kind of in the internet writing world, and the physical world, very established, but probably punches above or leads with his internet presence.
Yeah.
How did you just like cold DM him, or did he
I replied to one of his tweets.
Oh, that's it. You said that.
Yeah. He DM'd me and he was like, hey, like, do you care if I share this? I can't remember if he shared it on Twitter or linked it in his blog.
Yeah.
But he shared it with his audience, and that gave me like I had no idea that him doing that would send that much traffic my way. It kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. And sitting back, I have some Nelk boys, Nancy Pelosi in me too, and that like I do probably more Nancy than Nelk.
Yeah.
But as in kind of representing the view of the establishment, I'm like, wait a minute, this person being you is 24 years old.
Yeah.
Is traded in his PA. No one can really verify, I mean, maybe you show receipts of like your trades and so on. But like the skeptical older like boomer or Gen X would be like, why would anyone pay attention to this one story out of millions? I mean, literally millions of other stories of someone buying stocks, making money, losing money. What was it about? What do you think it is about the way you communicated that story or that story itself that kind of punctured into, like this next level of attention?
I think it was two things. One, I was very transparent with the numbers. Like I went, the whole thing was ridiculous. It was, I was day trading my Roth IRA. I'd had like one $6,000 contribution. Like that was the most I could put in it. That was my first Roth contribution. And I parlayed it all the way up to like $400,000. And then, like I should have screenshotted my TD Ameritrade account while this was happening. Like this was, you could see exactly how the chart went. It was in like a 10-month period. And then there's this cliff where I lost like, it was like $150,000 or something in a day on just a really stupid trade. Like after the SPAC bubble pop, I'd gotten so just addicted to it. I was just trying to trade stocks after that.
Yeah.
So it was that. And like, I really got into, it wasn't just, oh, I did this trade, or, oh, I was so smart. I mean, I detailed the process. Like it wasn't just random. It was a series of like 25 or 30 trades, but I also kind of got into my psyche of like, I was waking up in the middle of the night checking futures. I couldn't stop checking my phone at the gym or when I was at work or when I was with my girlfriend at the time and all this stuff. And like how I almost just like snapped out of it when I lost the money and was like, what the fuck did I just do over the last year? Like I'd made all this money, but I was so stressed from just like not being able to turn my brain off. It just kind of like, it had been eating at me. And I didn't realize how insane that headspace was until after that happened. I was like, all right, I'm just putting in an index fund and I'm going to actually like focus on living my life for the next month or so. I said, give yourself a month, stop trading. And then if you want to do it again, cool, but like, just take a step back for a minute. But I wrote about that whole thing. I wrote about the trades, the headspace, like the whole absurdity of it. I just think because I was very authentic about it. I wasn't trying to come off as some like genius. It was just like, here's what happened. And I think a lot of people had similar stories. The numbers might have been different, but there were a lot of people trading stocks, a lot of people making money. Like it wasn't just the internet stuff. I had a group chat with 20 of my friends from Georgia who were all doing similar stuff. Like this was a pretty big thing. So I think it just resonated with people.
Yeah. And for those listening that are thinking about like writing online or writing about finance and so on, I think you nailed, I'll kind of categorize what I heard is one, the authenticity and the emotion of it. I think that is what makes your writing so good. I have like goosebumps thinking about it. It's like you really capture like the essence of the human experience through investing. And like you could maybe even like swap out investing through like, I don't know, like having, like, I want to know the emotional experience. Like if and when you have a kid, I'm like, I'm just as curious as your emotional experience there as I am when you lose, you know, $150,000 in a day. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that you are always there for the zeitgeist, right? It's like, you know, like what, like the reason why, like you could have said, I lost all this money on E-Trade in 2001 had you, you know, even, I mean, you might have been alive in 2001. But the, you know, who cares, right? Like that, that's like old news. And so you have this like really, so like for aspiring writers thinking about this kind of like, what do people care about right now? Like Travis and Taylor or, you know, TikTok bans, like as we're recording this. And like, if you can find a way to connect that to the human emotion and to the thing that the reader cares about, then there's like a winning formula, which you do really, really well. And we'll talk more about writing later. So take me back. So you make a bunch of money and you eventually quit to travel the world, right? Like you live like fucking 5 lifetimes in 26 years. So fucking cheating. I'm jealous. So do you share how much you had saved, like, or how much you had earmarked for that trip?
Yeah, I think I cashed out like $30,000, and I sold my car for another 20 something. So it was basically like I was making like 50 to 60K that year. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to essentially cash out my salary that I would have had. And I
From your Roth.
Yeah, you just take a small penalty on that. You can do it. There's the initial 6K you get back for free. Like you can take out your initial contribution. And then there was like a penalty on some of, I was like, okay, leave 6 figures in the account, let that compound over time, cash out some of it, sell your car, and then just like, let's see what you can do with it over the course of a year. And I remember talking to my dad about it. He was like, I thought he would disapprove, but I think part of the thing was like, because I'd already gotten into Columbia, it was kind of de-risked this. It was like, okay, this is like a 1-year thing. And he's like, I'm not going to pay for it, but if you can make the numbers work, like do it. And I made the numbers work. But yeah. So probably 50,
60K.
Yeah. Something like that.
Got it. That's wild too, that, because I'm wearing my Gen X hat for like my Nancy Pelosi hat for a lot of the things you're saying. And it's like, I always read these articles on the journals, like these people are cashing out their I'm like, who on earth is cashing out their IRAs? I'm like, oh, there you go. But like with the context, it makes a ton of sense. I think it's like, I think many of our listeners we're so like old, like wired that like, that's just a like third rail thing that you just never do that kind of shit. And it's like fucking cool to be like, no, like kind of like when I left BlackRock, be like, who leaves a 7-figure job? I'm like, well, when you have a lot of savings, like isn't the point of the job to have the savings so you can go live your life? So got it. And so how did you get into business school after a year and a half of work?
So I got in, that's honestly, that whole thing is kind of what even made the rest of it possible. I got into Columbia out of undergrad. So Harvard was the first business school to start this trend. Harvard, like 12 years ago, started a 2+2 program, is what they call theirs, where they let college seniors apply. And then if you get in, you work 2 to 5 years, 2 being the minimum. And then you go to school for the other 2 years. So 2+2. And Harvard was mainly targeting like STEM kids who might go into engineering or like software development or whatever, and not like wouldn't apply for an MBA at that point. But if they already got accepted to HBS out of undergrad, it's easier to just be like, oh, I'm already in. I don't have to like take the GMAT now, 4 years out of school. Like I'm just going to go. And they started getting like a lot of high achieving undergraduates locked in. So then all the other Ivies and Stanford and MIT essentially copied that program where I don't know what percentage of my class did this, but like they all, like I was in Columbia's first deferred enrollment class is what they called it.
That's so wild.
So I found out about these programs and I was like, I'll just go ahead. It was like free to apply to them too out of undergrad. So I was like, you know what? If I take the GMAT and do well on it, then I'm just going to apply to all of these and see what happens. Because I love Mercer University. It's where I went for undergrad. Like the main reason I went there was I wanted to play football, and they offered me to play football there. But Columbia is obviously a better school. So I got in, and then I was like, cool, this kind of de-risked the next 5 years of my life. I can just go work and then go to B school. And then at the time I figured banking or consulting, because that's what 45% of our graduating class goes into.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So it was because of that, it kind of gave me okay, I was going to I was already planning on traveling for like 3 or 4 months before school. And then when I made more money sooner than expected, I was like, I could extend that travel time like an extra 7 months and then still go to school and do the same thing. So, yeah.
Do you think you would have, if you were just working as a financial analyst without, in the hypothetical world where there's no Columbia MBA on the other side, but everything else plays out, COVID plays out, the games, all the SPACs, do you think you would have still quit?
I don't know. It would have been a lot harder because there would have been a lot more uncertainty involved.
Yeah.
Because I've thought about that, and then I've also thought about would I still have applied to business school later. I don't know if I would have gotten into Columbia because it would have been hard to articulate. Like, let's say that I did still quit, have the whole writing thing, started working with that other newsletter, Exact Sum, and all this stuff. I don't know if that story would have resonated with the admissions committee versus like when I was applying out of college, it's 4.0 double major, playing Division I football. That's a much easier sell than like financial analyst to blogger to business school. So I have no idea. I'm glad it worked out like it did.
Well, it's wild because I thought I knew your story pretty well, and I still was like, this is like Nelk Boys type, just like it's so random and haphazard. But as I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, there's like a risk management piece at every step of the way, which is not surprising given the success you've had in everything you've done so far. But to the outsider, I personally missed that. I thought you were like YOLOing your life more, which was like, they're equally cool to me.
So I definitely play that up a little bit too, just because like you have to be a little bit self-promotional on the internet. I think there's a spectrum to it. And like being loud works. And it's if you amplify the like, screw this, I'm traveling thing, that's going to catch more eyeballs than the, well, I have a job here. This is a master plan. Like this is cool, this is that, but I'm traveling for fun right now. Like, no, I'm hostel hopping. Yeah.
This podcast this episode is gonna be Jack Rains exposed, right? Your dirt, airing your clean.
That's right.
Your clean laundry, not your dirty laundry. So, okay, so you're traveling the world. You've got this 50, 60K of savings. You're learning how to write. Like you're becoming an internet writer, better at refining your craft. Where does the Exec Sum part explain that? Our readers will have no idea what that even means, what it is.
So some of them might know Exec Sum. It's funny, being a reader now instead of the editor on it, but there's this big daily financial newsletter called Exec Sum. We have like close to 300,000 readers now, and it's essentially like a recap of all the biggest headlines in business, but also earnings recap, and then a deal flow recap, which is the most valuable part for people in finance, like every M&A deal, venture capital deal, bankruptcy, restructuring, new debt raises, like any sort of financial deal that's over $1 million, we have highlighted in there. And this newsletter was started by this guy who was running an internet finance meme page called Liquidity, like a combination of lit, like getting drunk, and liquidity. He made the meme page as a joke. He used to work in banking and then private equity, then I think back to banking. But basically he like made a meme page just making fun of like Wall Street finance, all that. And then it blew up, and he had like 500,000 followers on Twitter and Instagram. And he was trying to figure out how to like capture that value and launch this newsletter. And because he worked in the industry, it was pretty easy for him to create a newsletter. Like he knew what he would be looking for in a newsletter. And just started writing it. And then he was like marketing it through his social profiles, and blew up, and it got big enough that he was like making probably not as much as he was in banking at that point, but like making enough to like make a decent living. And he went all in on it. And I come in the picture because I just messaged him on Twitter. We'd had one other exchange where I found his Spotify playlist. Like it was like a summer music playlist, and just played at a pool party. It was great. And I just messaged him on Twitter and was like, hey, this is really good. And he was like, thanks. Do you have any song recs for it? And I was like, yeah. So we were like collaborating on a Spotify playlist for like a month. And then I'd
Is
started
he
writing
anonymous at this point still?
he was
Like
still
when you're
anonymous.
collaborating with him?
Yeah, he was still anonymous at this point. And then when I started writing my blog, and then I'd apply to Morning Brew and these other jobs and didn't get hired, I saw his newsletter right around that time and just messaged him on Twitter again and was like, hey, I want to come work with you. And I was like, do you need help with your newsletter? And he was like, yeah, like I can pay you some money if you want to edit it. And it wasn't that much, but I was also living in hostels and like riding trains around Europe. So I didn't need that much money and I had some savings. This essentially made it where I didn't have to spend down the savings nearly as fast as I would have. And I was like, oh yeah, like I'm all in on this. So I joined him and I probably started working with him in like, we started talking in August or September, and I started actually working with him in December of 2021. And
like 6 months after you quit.
Yeah, basically. And when I'm doing that, I was like, oh wow, he's made a business out of this thing, like advertising and this and that. And that was the first time it went from, oh, I can get like a big audience in my writing to, oh, this could actually be like this can be a business, or like I could somehow monetize my stuff if I have enough people reading it. I didn't know what it would look like yet. But yeah, so it was sort of a fluke, but I don't know. I think a lot of this stuff is like, and you can probably test this in your own life. There's a lot of, we have a lot of opportunities where there's like some kind of fluke encounter or thing happens, but like you still have to take that leap of faith and capitalize on it. Like, it was just inquiring about helping him with the newsletter, but that opened up a lot of other stuff and largely sustained that whole year where I was traveling.
That's amazing. Yeah, I totally agree. I think we're very similar in that regards. I think for me, and the thing that I always come back to is like, I have a portfolio of work. I've written 300 blog posts, and there are tens of thousands. There are thousands of people that have read every single one. And so that is a body of work that, like, fuck my LinkedIn page. Like, if 10,000 people have read 100 of my essays, you know more about me than you need to know that my LinkedIn page could ever tell you.
And essays and blogs don't lie. Like, you can read that and you know if somebody can write well, right? Like, you can put whatever you want on LinkedIn. Nobody can stop you. But same thing with resumes. You can lie on a resume, but you can't, like, you can't fake good writing, which is a whole other thing. Like, once people have read your stuff and like it, they remember that.
Yeah. So totally. That's why we're here. So I want this exact something. It blows my mind because this is where I'm like totally Nancy, no Nelk.
Yeah.
So liquidity. I think I heard about liquidity through you, and I'm going to confess that it was probably. I mean, I'm turning 45 this year, so you're 26.
Yeah, we're like 18
you're closer
years
in age to my daughter than to me.
Okay.
So like, it's just generationally on many of these like themes and stuff, but like. I'm of the generation where we still find memes confusing. Like, either we don't know why they matter so much. We definitely can't like I start to get like heart palpitations if sometimes I try to make a meme. Yeah. And I start like sweating profusely and shaking and stuff. And we like in general are just like, what's the big deal about memes? And it wasn't until you introduced liquidity, I think, the first time we met, maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
And I followed the account on Instagram, and I'm like, holy shit. Like, this is so fucking entertaining.
You're a finance guy, so you probably get all the jokes. It's like niche humor, but if you worked in finance or at least know like what they're talking about, it's hysterical.
It is hysterical. And I mean, it would be a disservice for me to just, if you're listening and you're in finance and you've never like watched, like, I don't even know how to say it, like looked at financial memes. They are fucking hilarious, especially the ones on liquidity. And so there's this guy who, by the way, he's been not outed. He voluntarily outed himself, right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way,
he was about to get outed by one outlet and then did like a profile interview with, I think it was Financial Times.
Yeah,
he like wanted to do. So kind of both, a little bit of both. Yeah.
But this is wild to me that this account that's making these memes gets outed, whatever. And it's literally the front page of the Saturday Financial Times. The fucking front page. I'm like, what part of me is like, what the fuck? And another part of me is like, no, like, that was the only thing I wanted to read on that front page that day, because he influences culture and this small but big world that we live in of bankers and Davos goers and all that shit. So I guess my question for you on that was, what's his name?
Hank.
Did he start with the memes first and then did that earnings recap letter, or did he start with the earnings recap or did they? It was
memes for like, I don't know all the like details on the timeline, but I know the meme page was going for like 3 years before he thought about doing the newsletter.
Wow.
And it was like, he started it pre-COVID. And then when COVID hit, I think he was in the same thing like a lot of people were in, especially in banking, where the hours are already tough, but at least pre-COVID, like once you go home, like you're home.
Yeah.
And then once like, it was like everybody was just on 24/7 working remote, I think he just got burnt out and was like, realized that the newsletter route could be a way out of that. And then it worked.
That's wild. So just to recap for our listeners. So how old's Hank, like roughly?
He's like early 30s, probably.
Early 30s. So Hank's early 30s, working in private equity or banking, starts this meme account for fun. Meme account takes off, realizes that he's got the attention of people with deep pockets and influence, and starts a earnings recap newsletter that then basically matches the income from his private equity job. Is that fair?
Yeah.
That's just fucking wild. And I don't think enough people fully appreciate, look, that he's an outlier. He's maybe the Google or the Uber of meme pages, infinite, but still, like, the fact that that's even possible, I don't think most people listening to know this even recognize that that's in the realm of possibility, even as an outlier.
There's a few examples of people. He's the only one to build it off a meme page, but like the guys who started Morning Brew, and they had like, they built theirs much bigger than Exact Sum. They sold for like 75 million to Business Insider. And then there was another newsletter that used the same platform we do, Beehive, called The Milk Road, that was just two guys started writing a daily crypto newsletter. They sold for, I think it was in the millions. I don't know the exact number, but like
it was like 10 million.
This playbook has happened a few times now. The way that people built and marketed it changes a little bit. Like if you have a media property that a lot of people are reading that's about a specific topic, it can be valuable.
Yeah. Can I ask you, if you were to explain to older Gen X, young boomer, like why memes are so important, what would you tell them?
It's like, it's the only shareable form of humor. Like, you know what I mean? Where it's you send a picture and it's like, it captures whatever's like relevant and important in the culture, but in a funny way. And they can go viral. Like you can go to a really good stand-up show, and it's just like living in New York. I'm pretty close to the Comedy Cellar. I love going to comedy shows. But a meme can be seen by literally millions of people at once. And you can spread it on social media, text, email. Like you're just transporting culture through comedy. And the internet is like, it's just the most digestible form of comedy on the internet.
Yeah. And it's so compact, right?
Yeah.
Like I would think, as I'm hearing you describe that, it's like, oh, you could do the same with a reel or a TikTok, but that takes like 12 seconds to watch. A meme, you capture all of the emotion in a half a second.
Yeah.
It's do you feel like you're good at making memes?
I think I'm decent. I go viral on Twitter a lot, so I think I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah. What do you think what do you think the skill? I suck at, like, I try so hard. You could see my age when I try to make a meme. Like, what do you think what are the ingredients of making a good meme?
The biggest thing is like you have to have your finger on the pulse for like what stuff people are talking about, because you can have memes about like they're always based around some relevant thing, and it could be a very niche thing like working conditions in finance, or it could be a broader thing like something that happens in the Oscars or in the Super Bowl or Taylor Swift. But the best memes are like taking two seemingly unrelated things and all of a sudden making one of them describing the other one without actually saying the thing.
Saying it.
Like the best memes are the ones where like the viewer intuitively understands the punchline without being told it, which that's comedy in general, right?
Yeah.
It's just like a visual format of that. So I actually think that the thing that's funny about memes is the same thing that's funny about a comedian or somebody telling a story or anything else. It's just the medium is different. So like finding a format that's like, you can't really describe a meme verbally, so I'm not going to try, but like a format that people are going to recognize and then make it about either a relevant or current event.
Yeah. Oh man, it's crazy too. I mean, like big companies have I don't know if that's a joke itself, but like chief meme officers, or
I think some startups will do that, but you are seeing like some of the marketing efforts of certain companies, like Duolingo, their social media pages are hysterical and they are very good at meme stuff. McDonald's is the same way. Ryanair, like the European airline. Some companies have just like taken on a casual voice with their like social media accounts. They've gotten very good at like stuff like that. But if you're bad at it, it's so cringe. Like it's a binary thing. It's like there's this, you either don't do it or you're really good at it. There's like a valley. There's a valley down here of despair where it's worse than not trying.
That's probably why I get so worked up when I try, because I'm like, I never thought of it that way. But as you said that, I'm like, yep, that is spot on. So, all right, so you're working there. So let's pivot to we've talked a lot about the Nelk Boy side of your career. So you kind of go through the travels and you finish 2 years at business school. Meanwhile, while you're at business school, you become the world's most legendary shit poster, which is, for most people listening, or 50% of people won't know what shit posting means. It's basically like parody.
Yeah,
it's
internet satire. Internet
satire. On LinkedIn, where I think your most fame, like, didn't you get called into the Columbia Dean's office for one of yours?
Yeah,
or was that like, parody itself?
No, that actually did happen. It was my second week of school too, so it was. Yeah, I think it was within the first month or so of school. I put a post on LinkedIn. For context, like LinkedIn is a fascinating place because it has close to 1 billion active users. And pretty much anybody with a white collar job has to have a LinkedIn account because like you find jobs there, recruiters find you. Like you're at a disadvantage if you don't have one. But because it's so tied to people's work, very few people post on there. Like Twitter, there's a lot of anonymous accounts. Like half the stuff is anonymous accounts or just really opinionated people sharing their thoughts. It's like a safe space for just yelling. LinkedIn, you can't be anonymous. It's all like employees and companies. And then because it's so tied to your employment, nobody's going to post something on there that could be remotely like abrasive or controversial. But there's a lot of people on there. Like Twitter has maybe 400 million active users. LinkedIn has 1 billion. It's like 2.5 times bigger. And because nobody's posting there, it's way easier to be seen.
Yeah.
So I just had this, and I've noticed with my newsletter, the conversion rate of like people sign up if you link a blog post on LinkedIn more than Twitter. And their open rate for me is like 15% higher. So like targeting LinkedIn as a newsletter growth channel is a no-brainer. But most of the people who are actively marketing on there were just like, it was just people shilling, I don't know, like I'm rich, here's how to get rich, or like sales bros giving courses on how to be better at sales. Like there's nothing good on there. And there's a whole thing about people like humble bragging on LinkedIn about like humbled and honored to get my job promotion, or my kid was sick today, but I still went to the office because I care about shareholder value. So I figured if I can just parody that entire bit of like, oh, I work hard, look at me, like whatever, and be funny, I could probably build a massive following on LinkedIn, or I could plug my blog in those posts, but I would just have a big audience that when I just share my blog post independently, there'd be more eyeballs on it than there otherwise would. Yeah. So I mean, I go just like absolutely like schizophrenic with some of these posts. I mean, they're ridiculous.
We'll link to some in the tell your best one. They're like summarize your best one.
My favorite one, which got removed from LinkedIn, was claiming that I'd gotten vaccinated 1,000 times when Mayor Adams was paying people $100 to get vaccinated, and made $100,000 in 2 weeks. And people were like, "You're wasting vaccines that would like go to underprivileged people." And I'm sitting there thinking, did you just gloss over the fact that I claim to have gotten like injected 1,000 times in 2 weeks? So that would probably kill me. I don't know. And then it got removed for vaccine misinfo. And I'm like, It's not even misinformation. This is a very pro-vaccine post. I said I did it a lot. That one went nuts. But the one that I like, the only one that had any consequences was I claimed that I hadn't paid for food in New York City in months because I was going to random hotels around Manhattan and signing off on room numbers and then just like eating continental breakfast, going back for dinner, like a food hack. And somebody submitted a screenshot, like emailed a screenshot of it to our dean of students saying that they couldn't believe Columbia let a student in who's bragging about petty theft on LinkedIn and it was tarnishing the school's reputation. So like I go in to like meet with her and I didn't know how the meeting was going to go, but to her credit, she was like, this is a marketing strategy, isn't it? I was like, oh yeah. She was like, you're doing this and then building a following and like getting people to sign up for your newsletter. And I was like, and it's working. And I was like, look, if you want me to remove some stuff or like I can remove Columbia from my thing. She's like, no. Like I'm not. She's like, now that I get it, I'm cool with it. I just wanted to make sure you weren't actually like stealing. And I was like, I'm not. And she's like, as long as you don't put anything that's straight up like racist or misogynistic. And I was like, no. Like everything I put, your average person should read it as satire. And I wouldn't ever like push one of those boundaries. It's just like funny, fake finance hacks. And she was like, yeah, do your thing.
Wow. Dude, this is why I freaking love you, because you straddle like the fact that you straddle these two worlds, right? Nancy and Nelk. And then you go into the establishment and they're like, I respect what you're doing. It's just like, to a Gen X, that fucking blows my mind that like, A, that you have the fucking balls to do it. And then B, that you convert people. Not only they're like, oh, wow, I can't believe the balls to do it. But like, God, that's like, we need more of that. Or like, you know, like they like, you like sway their opinion to like be like your evangelist on top of it. It's just, it's fucking, I think it's like incredible.
If you have like a decent amount of self-confidence and then you're not an asshole, people are usually pretty friendly to you. Like as long as, because most people either walk in like trying to be abrasive with it, or they would just like immediately get apologetic. If you're like, if you just kind of own what you're doing, but you're very like, I don't know, just like be cool with people. And they tend to like, people don't care about stuff that much. I've never met anybody in person who's gotten mad at me about anything I've done on the internet. I've gotten yelled at and called some really weird stuff on the internet, but like I've never had somebody come up to me at a bar and be like, hey, I hate you. Like that LinkedIn post is fucked up. That's never happened.
That's wild, man. I love this. So you're going to Columbia at this point. Do you still think you're gonna, like, what job do you think you're gonna get?
So I remember spring of 2022, like before I started, I was like, I knew that I didn't want to do the banking or consulting route. I'd really enjoyed trading stocks when I was doing it. It stressed me the hell out, but like, I liked the game of trying to find stuff to buy that goes up. And I thought that would have been a very cool thing to do. So I thought for a little bit, like I would try to join a hedge fund if they like, I didn't know what the recruiting process or any of that would look like. But I figured that I could pitch myself pretty well given my trading thing. At least like I had a mind for it. But then I started noticing a lot more overlap in a lot of venture capital firms launching newsletters, podcasts, content stuff. And I was getting a lot of momentum with my newsletter. In my head, I was like, I think I need to double down on the writing thing. And then if I hit fall semester of my second year and I don't have good prospects I didn't know what it would look like. They're stemming from the writing stuff. I would look into more traditional stuff. So I just focused on my blog, ExecSum. I was running a like marketing course with one of my friends who's also a writer about
Nathan, right?
Yeah, Nathan, about like scaling up a newsletter, how to market it, doing all that. And that was doing well. And then fall came around and I started like looking into other stuff. And I reached out to like 2 venture capital firms where like I had a Twitter connection with somebody there. It was just like, hey, like I've been doing this and this, saw you guys are working on a newsletter, or like I like your content, let's chat. And with both of them, they ended up paying me as a contractor to like help them build their stuff. So once I realized I was 2 for 2 on that, I was like, okay, there's going to be something in like I need to stick with this. Like I'm good at this. I have an edge at this. I'm only going to get more and more of an edge at this the longer I do it. It would be crazy to diversify away from the writing stuff now that I have some momentum. And this was in like August or September. And then, which is how I ended up getting my current job. A guy that I'd met named Sam Rowe, who's he's been like all over the place, like Axios. I think he was a Business Insider, like been a finance media guy for a while. Reached out to me, was like, "Hey, RobinHood has hired me basically as a contractor to help them build out this new media venture team." And I'd briefly spoken to Josh, who's like now my boss, editor in chief, over the summer about, he was like kind of pitching me on it, but it was still pretty far off from the launch. So I didn't even know, like we hadn't spoken in months. I just thought that was kind of a one-off thing. And Sam was like, "Let's grab coffee and chat." And he started telling me about, they've got these big newsletters, trying to build out more stuff, more editorial stuff, like a whole media company. And he's like, "They're interested in you. Like, I think if you want to do media stuff, you should consider this." And I was like, okay. So we chatted, and then I started talking to the team again. And I was like, I'd never worked in a true like media room or media environment or with other journalists. And I thought all of that was fascinating. And I also thought this was a lot less risky venture than going to a more traditional media company, because it's backed by a much bigger fintech company. So like the rest of media is laying people off. They're actively like building out a team.
Yeah.
And the current newsletter was already like very solid, on good footing, massive distribution. So they're like, they have two benefits of like, it's not starting from zero. There's a pre-existing business, and they're backed by a business that wants to make the media thing work. So once I saw that, I was like, it's either this or like, within the writing space, this is literally the perfect gig for me. So it's either I do this or just decide to just keep blogging casually and do an entirely different job. And I wanted to double down on this. So that's kind of how I got here.
Wow. Did you, how did you like look at the odds, like, banking and private equity or consulting? Like, those are careers where if you stay on that trajectory, W-2 income, you're making 7 figures in 5 years. Media, I mean, the RobinHood thing, you might have like more upside because of like that company's positioning, right?
Yeah.
And the venture back. But how do you think of like the asymmetry, like economic payouts of like, more traditional finance career?
I didn't think that I would want to do because like if I was going to go into finance, there's a couple of hedge fund roles that potentially like it's not like I was actively recruiting for it, but like the hedge fund route is not a very well mapped out, okay, hedge funds are recruiting this class. It's kind of like do your own thing. I don't know what the earnings would have looked like on that, but if you go hedge fund, you're a hedge fund guy. Like if you go into banking, then you can go into private equity, private credit, VC. So if I did the hedge fund thing, I was kind of having to put all my chips in on that for the foreseeable future. And it's not like I had any standing offers that I turned down, but I wasn't confident enough in taking that path to do that. Banking is an interesting one because it is the highest paying job that you can like, there's a path to do it. You have to crush it, but like you can do it. You're going to get this money. But to get the like 7 figures plus, you do have to be in it for a certain number of years. So, okay, you go in as an MBA associate and say you make close to $300,000, a little over 300, depending on the bonus. Do that for a couple of years, VP, $500,000. Would I have stayed in banking for 5 or 6 years to get to the point that I was making the money you're talking about? I don't think I would have wanted to do that by then, because then I'm like 33, 34 before that hits. And then you're making so much money at that point, you can't step away from it. Like, kudos to you for walking away from 7 figures. Most people can't do it. I feel like most of your coworkers didn't and don't.
Yeah, they don't.
And I remember I've read like, I listened to a Michael Lewis podcast with Tim Ferriss, where he was talking about walking away from his job at Solomon Brothers when he was writing Liar's Poker. And he was saying how if it was today, he didn't even know if he could, because the money would have been so much bigger. This is what I always wanted to do. And if I didn't start off doing this, I don't think I would have ever come back to it.
Yeah. It's like, it's so clairvoyant, because a lot of people would have said in your shoes, just suck it up for 5 years. Then you can start doing the thing that you want to do. That's like, quote unquote, less lucrative. It's on TBD if it's less lucrative, but like probability adjusted, it's less lucrative.
For sure.
So, but it's like, no, it's kind of like taking away tapping into part of your IRA, or your Roth IRA, to be like, no, this is the thing I want to do now, and I'm good at it. It's fun. And then, again, like as I'm hearing you talk, like your career is like so strategic. And, I think like when you put yourself out there, like we've said, luck and opportunities find you. I think the number of opportunities that must have found you through your internet presence must be through the roof.
Yeah.
And so it's just, right. It's really fucking impressive. I wanted to ask you, what did your more buttoned up Columbia Business School colleagues think of you?
I would say that it's a mixture of like confused intrigue and not admiration's too strong a word. I'm not going to be like, oh, everybody wants to be Jack Rains. That's not true. But I do think people think it's cool that I've found my own thing.
Yeah.
And there's a few other people, like there's people doing all sorts of stuff. And I'm one of the, like, I didn't do an internship last summer because I wanted to double down on this. I think it's one of those things where because it's working out for me, it's cool. But if I was still just blogging post-graduation, it'd kind of be like, then why'd you go to business school?
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate to find like I found a job that's exactly what I want to do that also leverages on top of my own stuff. And like, I still have full freedom to write my own blog how I want to. Like, it did not hinder my personal ambitions in any way to take this job. And they actually feed off each other. Like, we've got a massive audience. I write, like, I want as many people as possible to read my stuff. This is my way to do it.
Yeah.
So I think most people think it's interesting that I was able to almost like form my own career from my own interest.
Yeah.
A question I get a lot now off of this is like, then why'd you even go to business school?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is probably something you can attest to too. You said you were in BlackRock, not Blackstone. I want to make sure I get the correct object.
I was at the 20 basis point firm, not the 2 and 21.
Perfect.
And I say Blackstone, Hamptons, BlackRock, Jersey Shore.
Yeah. So there's definitely a level of credibility that you get when you have some sort. It's like getting like back when it actually meant something to have a blue check on Twitter. If you've been through certain jobs or schools or whatever, like people just take you a little more seriously.
Yeah.
I like to say that they don't. And this is where, like to me, I could have gotten the same job without doing business school. I don't know. But I'm going to be writing a lot of like finance and business commentary, and people take my voice a little more seriously when it's like, okay, he graduated from Columbia and now he's like a financial journalist versus he went to Mercer and was blogging for 5 years and now he's a financial journalist. It gives me more credibility. I think that matters. And I feel like this is something I've changed my mind on a little bit. I used to be so like anti-work, like the whole point of work is to like make enough that you don't have to work anymore. I think there's a whole gray area where like there are good jobs that pay well, that people enjoy, but there's this like, you go on Twitter and it's like, oh, screw the institution, school doesn't matter. Like, why would you work for that company when you can do your own thing? And then there's the whole like, no, you should go through all these steps and do your own thing. And I'm like, there's not any rules to any of this. Like, you can pick and choose which aspects of which stuff you want to do at any point. You just have to be very intentional about how you go about it.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And I mean, like, that's where there's so much overlap. And like, we kind of like define our own rules. Yeah. Created our own careers. But I think that credential point is so important. And I know, I feel like on social media, we're starting to have a credentials, shakedown, so to speak, where I feel like that will look that decision will look even smarter in hindsight. Let me ask you, do you, when someone comes up to you and says, they want to go to business school, let's say like a 22-year-old that's, that has like a non-finance job, like, kind of like your old job, let's say. And they're like, I'm thinking of going to business school. What questions you ask back to them, or what advice do you give them?
What's your GMAT score? And then I would encourage anybody to apply. I don't think it's worth going if you're not getting into like a top, say 15 school, or a school that has a track record of hiring from the type of company you would want to work at. Like, the MBA is the degree is only as good as the school you get it from. And that's true with every degree. But if you learn how to code, you can get a computer science degree from a lot of places and do good work. Like the difference between the first and the 50th ranked CS degree is not nearly as big as, say, the number 1 and number 25 MBA. Like Harvard and Stanford are probably number 1 and 2 year in, year out. And then there's a bubble of maybe Wharton. And then you've got like Sloan, Columbia, Kellogg. Like, you need to be at one of the ones that's really, really good, because no matter where you go, it's going to be expensive. So if it's not one that's going to, one, give you a lot of lucrative job opportunities, and two, put you in an environment with a lot of professors who are doing interesting stuff. Like a lot of like Columbia probably has the best faculty anywhere, especially out of our professors who are like working full time and then teach a night class. And most of my classmates have a very high likelihood of being like very successful in different endeavors, and that's going to benefit me. So if it's not a situation like that, then it's not worth it. And the like higher ranked schools tend to have a bigger group of full-time students where the student life experience is better. Like, I think everybody looks at it like, what's the ROI on how much I pay and how much I'm going to make? You're also there for 2 years. Like it's a like not small amount of your life, and you should enjoy it. And for me, it's like in a very fun group of people, but it's also, we've traveled a lot. Like, we have a lot of fun in New York. I've had more fun in business school for the last 2 years than I had traveling abroad for a full year. And I had a lot of fun traveling abroad for a full year. So like, it was a pretty high bar. And if you just go get an MBA somewhere random, I think it'll be less enjoyable. And then you might be frustrated with like your career outcome from it too.
Yeah. Jack, man, we're going to have to do a round 2, because there's 9,000 questions that I wanted to ask you that we ran out of time on. So thanks, man. Like I said, you're an extremely talented writer. I freaking love everything that you're doing. I'm excited for this next chapter of yours, and it's just fun. It's just fun to be on the, to be on the Jack Rains rocket ship, as a passenger.
Appreciate it, man. So. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll put it all in the show notes. But where can people go find you?
The best place would be just look me up on Twitter or LinkedIn at Jack Rains. I think I'm the biggest following for any Jack Rains on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can read my blog at youngmoney.co. So it's Young Money, like Lil Wayne's record label, .co instead of .com, because that's his website. So Twitter, LinkedIn, and then my blog, youngmoney.co.
Awesome. And we'll link to all those. Jack, this is awesome, man. Thank you.
Thank you.